Okay, guys, here we are again in the detached garage. We're away from the layout in my basement. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on track gauge and things like that, track widths and scales. I first started getting inspired to do my 1/32nd scale Army layout by visiting my wife's friend's husband's layout. And his layout is all O gauge. It's really nice and very creative and very therapeutic. So I was drawn to it. I thought I would go down the O gauge tracks myself, but I really wanted to stick to a scale with the Army men. But I'd already started to go down this G scale avenue because I collect a lot of action figures. I collect tons of action figures. 1/18 scale, 3 3/4 tall action figures. That's my first hobby. In fact, like right under my bench here, these tackle boxes, these are all full of action figures, and there's a bunch more inside. So I thought about using G scale trains and scenery in some of my action figure world building, but there's only so much time in a day, and my focus gets drawn to other things. So sometimes the G scale stuff gets shoved to the side, especially based on things like price. But if any of you follow my Facebook content, 3.75 Deep Dive for the plug, you would know that I've been straying a lot into 1/32nd scale content. So it's probably annoying for the guys that follow the 1/18 scale stuff. But I just like all sorts of toys. I even collect other things like model trucks over here and trucks over here and trucks over here and a lot of junk. I got a lot of junk. But anyhow, back to the topic. So track wise, I envisioned this idea where maybe I can do a layout that I can make interchangeable from G scale to gauge one or one gauge or 1/32nd scale. So these two trains are actually different scales. So if you took a figure, this one's pretty much, well, this is actually Playmobil, which is very toy-like, but we're going to do some liberties with this and say this is about 1/20th scale. This is about as big as commercially available for 3.75 action figures. But we're not going to do any figure comparisons today. We're going to do track comparisons today. This is the gauge 1, which is 1/32nd scale, which equates to a little green army men size. So if I had a little figure in there, he would work well in the green army men world. The interesting thing, which nobody tells you unless you dive deeply into this hobby, is even though the scales are different, here, I'm going to use this instead because this is also G scale. Even though the scales are different, the wheel width is the same for these two. So if I have a gauge 1 or 1 gauge track, 1/32nd scale track, gauge 1 is 1/32nd scale, I can run G scale locomotives and stock on there. So the track width is the same. So the scale might be a little off because the railroad ties, maybe they're wider. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. But the wheel width is the same. So whereas this is a G scale, I'm not sure if you'd call this a gondola or a flat car. The same track would work with this gauge 1 track. In fact, this piece of track right here is part of this set. So trying to do it one-handed, I can't do it, but you get the idea. So that will work on the same track. So that gives you a lot of versatility. Now, during my research, I discovered this gentleman's YouTube page. His name is Stephen Douglas. Really like his style. He does a lot of tin plate stuff, and he does. He actually inspired me to do these videos. So, Mr. Douglas, if you're watching, we've never met, but I like your almost daily content. So he on his layout has 5-rail track. So he started getting into something called standard gauge, which is pre-war, pre-World War II. Standard gauge track is pretty wide. Here's a piece of standard gauge right here. So these are the older pre-war Lionel and some other brands like Ives and things like that. Tin railroads. They're, I'm sure you've all seen them. They're those big boxy looking things. And there's all sorts of steam locomotives, a lot of great stuff. But this track, this standard gauge track, the locomotives and things are generally 1/32nd scale. So being that I started to really like this vintage metal toy look, I was drawn to it. So once again, standard gauge, 1/32nd scale. However, if you take a proper 1/32nd scale locomotive, it does not work with a standard gauge track. So let's just keep that off to the side for now, and we'll keep that in mind. Now, O gauge, which, forgive me, I don't have any decent O gauge stuff. I just have this silly piece of garbage, which I'm going to try and make into some sort of sci-fi train later on. But this is my only O gauge piece. O gauge is very popular. All sorts of great stuff available. But the track, it just wasn't what I wanted to get into, because my basis of collecting is more about the Army men, which is a little bit too big for O gauge. But however, an O gauge train goes on an O gauge track like this. And so what's one to do? Well, Stephen Douglas made 5-rail track, in which he took standard gauge track and he combined it with O gauge track. And he gives you a little lesson on his page on how to do it using the ties and the insulators and things like that. And he made 5-rail track. Now, what is really cool about 5-rail track is versatility. So when I was talking about 1/32nd scale and G scale versatility, now you got 5-rail track, and now you can run standard gauge, which once again, I don't have any standard gauge. You can run standard gauge on it. That's on the outer 2 rails. You can run O gauge, which is on the inner, these 2 rails, okay? And then the coolest thing is you can run G scale or 1/32nd scale. Let me see if I can get the camera lined up by offsetting a little bit on the rails there. So there you go. So it's a little bit of a tight fit, but let me see if I can zoom in. So if you use the outer rail of the standard gauge track and the outer rail of one of the O gauge rails, and mind you, there's a lot to learn here, so we have to be careful about O gauge because there's different heights. There's O27, which is a different height, and just O gauge. So you want regular O gauge. But now you can run G scale, or you can run 1 gauge. So we'll put 1 gauge on there. And so the only peculiarity is you're slightly off center of the symmetry of the track, but you could run your stock and your locomotives on there. So I definitely want to go down this road. I want to pursue this further. This is my test piece, and I've actually hooked a transformer up to make sure that everything works as intended, because you have to use insulators and things like that. And it works. It'll work with, transformer-driven model railroads, and it'll work with battery-operated railroads, and you'll get so many gauges of versatility. Now, that's just the track. As far as your scenery and your buildings and things like that, yeah, you would want to scale those appropriately. But I just wanted to show you that. I think it's great. There's another fella. If you do a deep dive on YouTube and search 5-rail track, there's another fella. And then I believe there's a company that sells it. For the life of me, the name is escaping me right now. But if it comes to me, I'll put it in the description. So anyhow, I guess that's enough hobby stuff for now, and time to do some real homeowner stuff and mow the lawn.